Ultimate superhero is back on the big screen.
I got you.
You've got me! Who's got you?
The epic blockbuster returns, restored and remastered to its original brilliance, with footage never before seen on the big screen. Marlon Brando, Gene Hackman, Christopher Reeve, Margot Kidder. Superman, the movie.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to an all-new episode of the Chronic Rift podcast here on Facebook Live. It is June 24th, 2018. The month is going by very quickly, and we're here today to celebrate the 40th anniversary of Superman the movie. Do you remember where you were back in 1978 when that movie came out in movie theaters? I remember it being one of the first movies I ever actually saw in a movie theater as a kid. And still get fond memories flashing back to it. And I've got with me a group of people here today talking about this episode at length. Here, starting first with Mr. Ken Holtzhouser of The Quick and the Dad and our own critic here on the Chronic Rift podcast. Hey, Ken.
Hello. You may not understand it, but I am here for a reason.
Also joining us by phone is Mr. Glenn Greenberg, author, critic, a man who recently got to interview Mr. Richard Donner himself. Hey, Glenn.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm doing well. Now, we also have one other person here on the line, but for some reason, I'm not getting his picture image again. His name is Joe Stuber. He is the host of Comic Book Central, one of my favorite podcasts. Hey, Joe.
Good morning, all. Where did I go? Maybe I'm off watching the movie. I don't know.
The video just went off. Oh, there you are. Now let me see if I can bring you in. There you are. There he is.
Good morning, all.
Good morning. Welcome.
I didn't take off on you. I'm still here.
You're still here. I just all of a sudden I go to the switchboard here and I'm looking and going, I've only got Ken on camera. I don't have you. But
the power of invisibility. I don't use it often, but.
Now, as we always do here on the Chronic Rift, for me, unfortunately, I don't have a Superman mug. I'm here with my usual, and he's got it backwards anyway, Batman mug. And you'd think I'd hold it right because I'm thrilled. One of the reasons I like this mug is it's an actual left-handed mug. But are any of you drinking from coffee mugs this morning here that you wish to share? Start with Joe.
I've got my history of Superman here. Look, it's early. I've got to get my caffeine in me, but yeah, it seemed appropriate. It's not Christopher Reeve, but the era is represented in there.
Yep. And based on your background there, I see some other Superman paraphernalia as well.
I tried to dress up a little bit. Tried to do some set decorating this morning a little bit, but this actually right here, I don't know if you can see it, but it's it's art by John Pinto, amazing artist. I had a chance to meet him at the Superman celebration in Metropolis last week, so I was able to pick up that print there. But obviously, a lot of the cast were there at the Superman celebration from the movie. John was there. I got to interview him for the latest episode of my podcast, so that's there. And of course, the man. I gotta, I gotta have Christopher Reeve behind me.
And Ken, are you drinking from anything this morning?
I am. I am drinking from my question mark Riddler cup. Maybe it's coffee.
Maybe it's not exactly. Now, Glenn, are you drinking from anything that, even though we can't see you?
I'm drinking from a bottle of essential water, but I am looking right now at my Christopher Reeve Superman action figure.
Ooh! Now, who produced that?
Oh boy. It's those ones that the giant size ones that yeah. Oh boy, I don't have the box in front of me, just the figure. I'd have to look it up. Oh boy, give me move along and I'll get back.
And you'll find out.
Yeah,
Let him Google.
Right, exactly. Well, because I remember it was a big deal that because it came out around the same time as the Michael Keaton Batman figure, if I'm not mistaken.
Around the same time. I don't think it was the same year, but definitely within a year or two.
Right.
Yep.
Well, like I said, we're here today to celebrate, and it is a celebration because, for God's sakes, I mean, in many respects, I look at this movie as still the benchmark that all other superhero movies have to follow along. I know a lot of people look and they start with, maybe Iron Man or Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, but to me, it's like, no, you got to go all the way back to 1978 and Superman the movie. I mean, yes, there may be some special effects that don't work to this day. Maybe you're put off a little bit by the fact that is pure Christopher Reeve in that costume. There's not a little bit of padding anywhere in there. To me, though, it all works. It's all beautiful. And to me, it is still the definitive Superman as far as how the character is portrayed. To me, it's the most faithful to the comic book as far as I'm concerned. Now, each of you wanted to step up and do this episode because you have a passion, an interest in Superman, and in particular this movie. Let me start with Ken here. Ken, for you, what is this movie all about?
Well, I remember I was 9 years old when this came out. This was, like you, this was probably the first movie I saw in a movie theater. And I remember that overwhelming feeling of something that I love being taken seriously, that I was a ravenous consumer of comic books, and I could tell you about the jeweled mountains of Krypton and every different rainbow color of kryptonite and all of that kind of thing. But I always felt like it was just niche. It was just kid stuff. And then to see a lavish, big budget, properly, seriously handled version of Superman really made my heart soar. I just loved it. And I think also it was the first time that I really got to grips. I mean, I'm 9 years old, but it's the first time I got to grips with the idea of an adaptation that veers just slightly from the source material, where you can take the pure essence of it and put it on screen. I didn't need Jor-El to wear a green tunic with a little exploding sun on it or anything like that. I didn't need the minutia of comic book mythology. I just needed it to feel right. And this movie, every possible way, just felt right to me.
I think that's something to it, though. It's also, you point that out, taken seriously. I mean, and you all know, I'm a huge Batman 66 fan, do the Batcave podcast and all, but still, to a certain extent, it wasn't Batman, at least the way everybody has this idea of Batman in their heads and such. And before that, unfortunately, Superman, I love the old Superman television series and all, but it brought about, the stereotyping for George Reeves and ultimately his death by suicide. So now along comes this movie, and it's big and it's lavish, and they're not going the way of, say, even like a Flash Gordon, which again, I love that movie, but you're right. It is serious. Joe, what about you?
I think it goes back to the original tagline 40 years ago. The tagline of the movie was, "You'll believe a man can fly." And to this day, I say all the time on the podcast, I still believe. I know it. I saw a man fly on the screen. You referenced a couple of or at least one of the things, the George Reeves TV show. That was sort of my point. I obviously saw it in syndication years later, every day. But it was always, him in one position, flat on the board. And, you could just tell. I mean, it was fun to watch, but you didn't believe that you saw a man fly. Super Friends, I love that. It was the animation. I loved watching Super Friends. I loved the old Filmation, watching those things. But I just remember, and I think I was 11 at the time, cold winter in Pennsylvania, going to the movie theater, and you just didn't know what you were going to see. And then I think we'll talk about this coming up too, but the opening titles. I talked about this on a recent John Williams special on the IndieCast, but we talk about those opening titles of the movie and John Williams' theme coming in, and it's just this assault on the senses. you're exhausted by the time it gets to Krypton, and you're just like, what in the world did I just see? This is different than anything I've seen. We saw Star Wars, and we saw the Star Destroyer coming over, and that was amazing. But now this is just almost next level stuff. And then in the Fortress of Solitude, you watch the whole movie, and then there's the scene in the Fortress of Solitude where he appears in costume for the first time, and he does the takeoff, and he does the bank toward the camera, and you can't see wires, and you know that you can see the shadowing and the angles, and I saw a man fly. I literally just saw a man fly. That never left me. It's kind of like the rolling boulder in Raiders. It's the Star Destroyer in Star Wars. Those are those images that stay with you. And to this day, I still watch it, and I'm just blown away. And I've had a chance to talk to some of the Castelia Salkind, and I asked him about it. When did you first know that you had it? When did you first know you were onto something? And without even prompting, he referenced that scene in the Fortress of Solitude. He said when they got that, they watched the dailies back, they knew they had it at that point. They knew they had the audience hooked. So to this day, 40 years later, I know I saw a man fly. I know Christopher Reeve actually flew. He had the power of flight. No one's ever going to convince me anything different. It's just an amazing film that just stays with us. We're still talking about it 40 years later. It's the gold standard. It really is.
It's the gold standard. And like you say, you can believe a man can fly. I mean, these days now, yes, it's wondrous what we can do with special effects. But even sometimes the special effects of some of these flights in some of these superhero movies look a little wonky. It never, with the exception of, and we're not going to get into that today, Superman 4, I never felt that the flying sequences were in any way wonky. You were right. You can believe, and to me, the one that always stood out, and I know it's not from this one, is Superman 2, as he's diving towards the Eiffel Tower. I was like, wow. I mean, to me, I could watch just that little bit over and over of him just coming right towards the Eiffel Tower. It doesn't look like a blue screen. It doesn't look like wires. It just looks like there's a dude out there hurtling towards the Eiffel Tower.
Yeah, or even if you back up a couple minutes, just the change in the alley. And then he takes off, and you've got that icon. And then we even have the photo images too, the iconic photo images of on the takeoff. And it's nothing holds up to that.
Exactly. Yeah. And what about you, Glenn?
Well, two things. One, the company that made that action figure is NECA, NECA. Okay. For me, I would say Superman is the grandfather of the movies that we're seeing now. And for me, it was interesting. This movie is what sort of sparked my interest in Superman. I was not a Superman fan as a kid. Oh. I didn't like the comics. I felt that, and I didn't appreciate the genius of Kurt Swan at the time. I learned to. But at the time, Superman looked like a middle-aged, overweight guy who was balding. He didn't have a lot of personality. There wasn't a lot of interest there for me. I was not a fan of the George Reeves TV show for a lot of the same reasons. It was so limited in what they could do with the character, and he just didn't have a lot of personality. At that time, I was a Batman nut, and I was a Hulk nut. I wasn't even a Spider-Man nut yet. That came a little bit later. What this movie showed me is how much fun and personality and humor and humanity Superman could have as a character and as a series. And so for 8 years, I kept on wondering why DC Comics didn't take their cue from this movie, because the comic books remained more or less the same. The movies didn't have that much of an impact on the comics until John Byrne. Once John Byrne came in and did the Man of Steel, I bought every comic book that had Superman's name on it for about 10, 15 years. And that was because of the interest that this movie sparked. Once the comics became more like this movie, then I started reading the comics on a regular basis. Because what this movie gave me and what it showed me was the humanity of Superman.
Now that's it. I never really thought about that. I mean, honestly, that's when I started picking up the comic myself too, was the John Byrne run. But I picked it up more because I just was a John Byrne fan. So I was really curious to see what his take on Superman would be, because I felt he also revitalized Fantastic Four. But now that you say that, it does make sense that he really went and just said, let's do the movie and did his version of it there. By the way,
Yep.
Just really quick, folks, if you're online, leave your thoughts here on the Facebook page. We'll post your comments, like, for instance, David Alexander, who's joining us this morning. Good morning, David. Let us know, what do you remember about watching the original Superman movie? What memories, what things make you happy about this movie as we celebrate it here today? Go ahead, Glenn. I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem. The other thing I remember very, very vividly is that when the movie came out, my father was in the hospital having had a heart attack. And so just to sort of get away from it all, my mom took me to see it. And so you can imagine having a father in the hospital recovering from a heart attack. The scene with young Clark and Jonathan Kent hit me like a ton of bricks. And to this day, I have a really tough time watching that scene where Jonathan Kent dies because it always takes me back to that moment in time. Now, my father obviously survived, but still, the impact that it has on you when you're 9 years old never really goes away. So the combination of that scene and the music and the funeral that follows, just it really still weighs heavily upon me. So this was a movie that really affected me emotionally on a whole bunch of different levels. Like I said before, the humanity that it brought to the Superman character, but also the very touching and effective small moments. Really, I just thought were incredibly powerful.
Now, you say that, and I think about what we were talking about just before the show started as well, because we talk about the music, the iconic music, but also those iconic opening credits. And recently, the creator of the credits passed away.
Yes, Richard Greenberg. No relation.
No relation. Oh, but it is true. It's funny how, something like that. I mean, I go back to, because I always find the similarities there. But I'm a huge $6 Million Man fan. A big part of what people remember from the $6 Million Man is the theme music, is the iconic opening credits with the computer graphics and stuff, which was unheard of back in 1974, 75. And now here we go with Superman in 1978, and it's just from the music and the titles of each of the names coming at you, it still sticks with us to this day. I'd say they're almost as iconic an opening as the Star Wars scroll.
I would agree. And the music, I would say the combination of those credits and the music, I feel that Superman the movie is probably John Williams' greatest work. Because just from my own perspective, nothing else affects me on an emotional level the way his score for Superman does. And I love his score for the Star Wars movies. I think The Empire Strikes Back is his best score for Star Wars. But on an emotional level, I mean, I get chills when I listen to certain pieces from Superman the movie in a way I just don't in anything else that John Williams has written.
Couldn't agree more. I could not agree more. It's absolutely people. I don't know if you folks have Desert Island discs, Desert Island books, Desert Island discs, but that is look. You can't talk about Superman the movie without having it right here. And it's the gatefold cover too.
Wow.
That opens up to the Christopher Reeve gatefold cover. This is my original. I absolutely agree with that. It's my Desert Island disc. Far and away John Williams' best work, and it's almost three soundtracks when you think about it. You talk about the Krypton scenes. Donner talks about three movies: Krypton, Smallville, and Metropolis. It's three soundtracks. They're completely different scores almost, and yet they blend together seamlessly. It's so iconic. They ended up using it in the second movie. They wanted to get Williams, but they couldn't get him, and so I believe it was Ken Thorne was given the marching orders. You have to use John Williams music. Yeah. Obviously, Bryan Singer felt it was important. Don't get me going down a rabbit hole with some of the new stuff, but Tim Burton, he realized it. It's funny. I had a chance to talk to the guys, the showrunners on Lost in Space, or the producers on the new Lost in Space, when they've worked the John Williams Lost in Space theme into that. So we talked. I asked them what was the importance of that, and we talked a little bit about it on the podcast, but that one of the quotes was amazing. He's like, "Look, if you have John Williams music, you use it." It was a no-brainer, and it was like, yeah, you think about it. I mean, you can't do an Indiana Jones film without that. No one would even think about it. So, and then we talk about nostalgia. That's part of mine too. That was a gift from a family friend as we were going to see the movie. I think it was for the second time, and she had bought me the soundtrack, and I opened it up. And back in the day, we didn't have VHS. It wasn't on TV. That was the way to relive the film. We didn't have a comic book adaptation. You can talk about that a little bit, but this was the way to relive the film. So I just played that over and over. So I couldn't agree more. This is far and away best John Williams score ever. It's always, that's the happy place. That's my happy place.
Yeah, and I really hope Warner Brothers wakes up and realizes that the Superman theme is as much a part of that character as James Bond's theme is for him, no matter who's playing him. So I hope that they work their way back. I mean, they started to in Justice League, and I hope that they work their way back to just attach that theme to that character and just go forward with it. Don't deny it anymore. Just go with it. Doesn't matter who's in the suit. That's Superman's theme.
Yeah. Amen. That's, how do you get away from it? I don't know why they did. I mean, again, it's another conversation. Don't get me started. There's another hour podcast in there.
I can kind of understand the thinking behind it, the modern thinking behind it, because as much as we love Superman the movie and as much as we revere all of the things that are correct about it, it does put a stamp for better and for worse on the character. I think to communicate this as not kids stuff, Superman is portrayed as incredibly benign and kindly and almost like a secular messiah. And that ends up affecting the character down the road when an audience in the 90s and the 2000s and the wherever we are now wants a darker, angrier, grittier hero to go with a darker, angrier, grittier times. It seems like hope is the first thing sacrificed for an action hero, and everybody that has come since Christopher Reeve has felt like they've got to get away from the Superman portrayal. So you avoid the John Williams theme and you avoid some of the more iconic beats because you're trying to put what you think is a modern stamp on it and that means you've just totally missed the point of Superman altogether as a hopeful figure.
Well, but the thing is this movie casts such an incredibly huge shadow on everything that has followed, because you watch Smallville, they used the Fortress of Solitude from this movie. You watch Supergirl, they used the Fortress of Solitude from this movie. In the last couple of episodes of Supergirl, they used quotes from this movie. I mean, they can't escape it. So it's just funny to me that, the TV folks seem to get it, it's the movie folks that don't, that really want to sort of distance themselves and not embrace the past and honor it. They feel like they have to reject it in a big way. It's almost like annoyingly so much that they take so much from the Donner film. You kind of wanted to see a little bit more creativity on especially on Supergirl. They just keep going back to the Donner film so much, which is great. That it's great for Donner. It's a real sort of testament to his work and to that movie. But it's funny. It's like I feel like they do it a little bit too much on the TV shows and not enough in the movies.
But isn't that something, though, to do? And just getting back to the music, because whenever I hear the music, my first thought is Christopher Reeve. Even Smallville, when Christopher Reeve did that appearance there as that professor, if I remember correctly, didn't they work in some strains of the theme into his scenes?
They did, and they actually used the full theme in the last few minutes of the last episode.
Yeah.
When he opens up the shirt to become Superman, we see him running on the roof of the Daily Planet building. They're using the John Williams theme.
Yeah, it's the Donner universe. It keeps weaving itself all the way through, and I think that, again, you hate to bash on some of the new movies. It's kind of like low hanging fruit on some of this stuff. But I mean, you go to the director too. I mean, Richard Donner said it from the beginning: verisimilitude. That was what he wanted whenever he created this movie. It was kind of jokey coming in the script. The effects weren't there. He wanted the believability of it, and he wanted to embrace. And I think everybody here so far has mentioned the word hope in a lot of their comments as I've been listening, weaving in and out of the conversation. That is the key to the character. They mentioned in Man of Steel, but next thing you know, it's real dark and buildings are crumbling and thousands of people are dying and necks are snapping. And it's just like, okay, you said hope, but it felt kind of hopeless and bereft at the end of this thing.
Right.
But you see this coming in, and I don't know if you've watched the new series Krypton. But okay, they worked the theme into it, and I just got chills. It's, there's one scene where the Superman S-Shield is revealed, and the John Williams theme comes in. They only used a little bit of it. They probably only afforded to use a little bit of it at the time. But it just gave me chills, and it's just that little bit. You just go, oh, that's what this is missing. It's that Donner. Now, Superman Returns, I think, was maybe – I love the film, but I think it was slavishly devoted to the Donner universe in that it's almost a remake of Superman the movie, down to Lex's plot and everything, the real estate, the land, and all those different things. But I still love it. I think that was a good reboot of it. I think it deserved another shot at it, but I think it almost maybe leaned too heavily on the Donner stuff. And as you're seeing some of these other elements, like on Krypton, you mentioned Smallville, where you're just kind of weaving it in. You're like, oh, that's part of the same universe. This is it. Oh, it's the same guy. Yeah, it's a different guy playing him, but it's the same character. I think that's what it needs. Who knows with where it's going now? I don't know if Joss Whedon's involved. Who knows who's going to be directing moving forward? But it would be so nice to kind of get back to that. Not exactly a remake, but bring those elements from the Donner Reeve universe in, the Williams theme, different things like that. I think we need it because, again, it's that character is hope. He's a friend. He even says it in the movie, who are you? A friend. And he's just there to help. He's not there to just revenge and all these different things, so.
Well, I would say the film didn't do well, but I would say they nailed him in Justice League. They really nailed the character in Justice League, and I was really happy to see that. And for me, that's what made Justice League for me, was that they finally got this version of Superman right. And I think Henry Cavill showed just how good he can be as Superman.
Do you think that was because of the reshoots, though? Because, because they came back and reshot all of Cavill's stuff. Whedon came in and reshot everything. Do you think it's because Whedon came in and went, we got to get closer to Reeve?
Oh, yeah. There's little doubt in my mind about that. Having Zack Snyder removed from the project basically saved Superman, in my opinion, because Zack Snyder, and I've interviewed him, very nice guy, but doesn't have a great take on Superman in my humble opinion.
Not the tone. It's a tone of the director. He's more dark, gritty, grim, violent. And Joss Whedon is, as we've seen in the Avengers, light. Yeah, comedic, fun, Marvel-ish, if you will. Template, have fun. You can have some dark moments, but have fun with it. So. But
let me because now we keep coming back to this, and we're talking about how Donner-esque and bringing in and Superman and everything. But the one thing too that to me, and I want to show this clip here that I've got ready to go. Part of also what sold Superman to me was Clark Kent. In the comic books, he was always the bumbling. He was kind of shy. He was kind of inept. He was nervous. Even the TV show with George Reeves didn't really pull that off too often. Yeah, Lois would go, oh, Clark. But Clark really never, there were times Clark was more brave than Superman, it seemed. And don't get me again, I love the old TV show. I watched it. I went to the movie theater all excited, but when I walked away, I couldn't watch the TV show for a while because I was like, my God, that's Superman, and I think part of it to me also is that, yeah, you can have Superman. At the heart of it, Superman's kind of boring. I mean, he's just this big, strong guy. If he doesn't have that humanity, and that's what Christopher Reeve brought as Clark Kent. And I just want to show this. It's a scene from the movie here. It's not the one that everybody seems to always think we should be showing here, but basically where Clark and Lois are about to be mugged. So let's take a quick look there here, and let's talk about a little more about Christopher Reeve on the other side.
Sure.
You like Mr. White?
Yeah, I thought he was a really nice guy. Jimmy Olsen was fantastic.
Hey! Huh? Come here. Come on. Get in here. Hurry up.
Come on. Clark, I think we better get out of here.
I think we better do what he says, Lois.
That's it. Come on. Get in here, quick.
Don't do anything. It's all right. We're coming.
Come on.
We're coming. Come on.
Excuse me. Go back there.
Here?
Yeah.
Please don't point that at me, sir. You could hurt somebody with that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. Hold it there.
Just a minute, mister. Just a minute. Now, I realize, of course, that times are tough for some these days, but this isn't the answer. You can't solve society's problems with a gun.
You know something, buddy? You're right. I'm going to turn over a new leaf.
Good for you, sir. That's the spirit. See, he doesn't really want to hurt anybody.
Uh-huh.
Right after I rip off this lady's purse.
Of course.
Now, come on, lady. Hand it over.
Lois, I think maybe you better... Lois, what are you doing?
Clark! Are you all right, Clark? What happened?
Golly, I guess I must have fainted.
Fainted? You fainted?
Sorry.
So, okay. I mean, in that scene there, it's funny because you've got Clark, and when I like think about how George Reeves would have played that scene. And while he would have been nervous and said, Lois, he'd still, though, in some way be threatening the guy, and you'll never get away with this. There's Clark, Christopher Reeve, he shrinks up he's like, we really should just do what he says, and then the bullet goes off. And, Lois has her back turned for whatever reason. She kicked the gun, but then she turns away. It's like, oh crap, I just, this is the end or something. I don't know. But the gun goes off. He catches the bullet. He drops to the ground. And you can see that moment there as he's just laying there. And suddenly the shrinking, the confidence comes out for a moment. And he's smiling like, yeah. I love that. And to me, that scene sank in not only who Clark was, but who Lois was as well.
Yeah, definitely. And she is so missed, Margot Kidder. Just passed away recently too. And it's, her performance in this movie is just amazing. The first two movies, especially, she's just amazing in that. But that's the great thing about the George Reeves TV series and the Christopher Reeve movie is we do get those sort of two different performances. I know, when I talked to Dean Cain, he mentioned that his performance for Clark was based on George Reeves. He liked that confident Clark. In the TV show with George Reeves, he didn't care if you figured out he was Superman or not. It's going to be the same guy. Didn't even change his hair. Right. But you're right, and especially if you see like Superman, excuse me, versus the Mole Men. Clark does most of the work in that movie. So, yep. but it's so cool because Christopher Reeve did take it in a different direction because you had to believe, again, it was that believability, verisimilitude. You had to believe that people could be fooled by this. And so when you take that scene there and then obviously you combine it in the post-flight sequence with Lois, when he comes in, he's there for their date and he's almost she goes in the other room and he's going to tell her, and he takes the glasses off and he straightens up and all of a sudden he's like 6 inches taller. He's much bigger and he's Superman. And then all of a sudden she sheepishly puts the glasses back on and affects the sort of nerdy voice and everything. That performance is unbelievable. Just in that little bit, those few seconds, what you showed there in the mugging scene and then in that scene as well. His performance is so unbelievable. Those little moments that he brings to Clark, it's fantastic.
Right. Well, there's also the little moment that he brought to Superman, which is after he rescues her from the helicopter and she's stunned, and he says about statistically speaking, flying is still the safest way to travel. He turns his back on her. He's about to he's about to fly off. He turns his back and she's like standing there dazed. He's got such a grin on his face. He knows the effect that he's having on her and he loves it. And this is a guy who enjoys being Superman. And so it's not just the Clark aspect, it's the Superman thing too. I don't really remember, too many instances and I could be wrong, but I'm just going from memory. I don't remember too many instances of George Reeves showing that, it's fun to be Superman. He's having a great time being Superman. Christopher Reeve did, even in that one little moment. So for me, that just spoke volumes.
Now, Robert McKeown, who's on Facebook Live, welcome. Good morning, Robert. Says, I think the way that Marvel portrayed Captain America in the first film, especially, and the Winter Soldier, was closer to Superman's creed of truth, justice, and the American way. Henry Cavill's Superman is trying to be Chris Nolan's Bruce Wayne without the bucks. The scene in Superman, the movie that sells Clark, is in Lois's apartment when Clark takes his glasses off and contemplates revealing himself to Lois and then changes his mind. Now, I don't know. Am I mistaken? I thought that was Superman 2, no?
No, Superman 1.
That is Superman 1. Okay.
Yeah.
Superman 2 is when he reveals it. Or when he lets it
accidentally. Yeah. Maybe you didn't want to with your heart or what? With your mind, but you want to with your heart? Is that the line?
Yeah. He trips over the bear and sticks his hand in the fire.
Yeah.
And too.
Right.
But that's a great point about Captain America, because I think I said that when the first Avenger came out, was that, hey, we don't, because Brandon Routh obviously, was switched over to Henry Cavill. I wanted that Reeve Donner universe back. I think a lot of us did. And then when Captain America came out, I think I even mentioned, well, okay, there's Marvel's version, but I think we got our Superman back. I think we got our Christopher Reeve back. He mentioned it. It was that's a perfect point. Is that I think that's the spirit. You get that spirit of the character, that tone right, and he's not Batman. Even Elias Alkine has said that when Man of Steel came out. He just said, "Yeah, it was a fine movie. It's too Batmanish." He called it. It was just too. It was dark. It's not the character. He's not the Punisher. He's not some of these dark anti-heroes that we see. So again, don't want to keep bashing on Man of Steel, but I think it's almost like that nostalgia. We want that hero back. That's the Superman we want to see. That's what we want to see on film.
Is it possible though today, in this modern age, with the way everything is? I mean, and I say that, but then again, we've got Spider-Man. We've got I mean. They're all able to take their light path and be hopeful despite all the odds against them and stuff, except for Infinity War, where I think we all wanted to kill ourselves. Oh my God, that was a sad movie. But
it's a part one. It's a cliffhanger. You got to wait for the second.
I know. I hadn't felt that depressed since Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah,
I guess you read the comics then John.
Oh man!
I mean, they're following the comics, so there's a part 2. Just
yeah. We mentioned the Marvel movies. Look at the template though they're putting down. It's like you mentioned, the Ant-Man. That's a comedy. The last Thor Ragnarok. That's a comedy. That's a full blown comedy. Yeah, Jeff Goldblum is a stand up comedian in that thing, as far as I'm concerned. So you can have these dark moments. No one's saying you can't be dark, because there are dark moments. I mean, the beginning of Thor Ragnarok. I mean, yeah, I mean, I think that was where he's coming down. He's captured, and there's this real dark moment. And all of a sudden, it's like Led Zeppelin's kicking in, and you're like, whoa! And I laughed through that movie the entire time. It's like you can have those things, you can have those light moments, and I wish they could bring that. You don't want to do that in Batman. I think the template is firmly set for those films, but you can do that in a Green Lantern. You could do that with. Maybe not a Green Arrow. Green Arrow might, lean more toward the, the vigilante, the Batman thing. But Superman, Green Lantern, those types of things, those movies you want to lighten up with. I think it's just the matter of getting the tone right. I think with Warner Brothers, what happened was the Batman movies were so successful that it was like, in Hollywood, that's what works. Just keep doing that. The tone's different. They're getting it right with Wonder Woman, I think. I think we're starting to see it. It's going to be interesting to see what they do with this next one.
The thing is, with, you bring up Batman and you say the template's set there and everything. The thing with Batman, though, is that Batman is who Bruce Wayne is. Bruce Wayne is the persona. Batman is the character. To me, I always looked at Superman as the persona, and Clark Kent was the real person. And what makes Superman work, if they do it right, is when they use all the characters, Jimmy and Perry, and they do in this movie. And again, I want to, one more clip I forgot to mention at the beginning of the show. Before we start, I want to bring this one in as well. Ken had produced this little piece on Lois Lane, and how Margot Kidder's portrayal is the definitive one. We've been talking about Christopher Reeve. And yes, Christopher Reeve, in my opinion, still stands to this day. As much as, there are certain portrayals I like. I even did like Brandon Routh's attempt at being Christopher Reeve. But, but when it comes to Lois Lane, it's sort of the same thing. When you look at every other portrayal of Lois Lane, no one else has seemed to ever nail the comic book the way Margot Kidder did. I want to just run this little thing that Ken had produced. We were going to run it on the In Review show a couple of weeks ago, but the In Review show got canceled. So I want to include it here as part of the retrospective here. And let's talk a little bit about Kidder as well on the other side.
Today's episode, Lois Lane versus Hollywood. Margot Kidder passed away this week at the age of 69. Known for horror films like Sisters, Black Christmas, and Amityville Horror, she's obviously best known as Lois Lane, immortalized in the 1978 classic Superman the Movie.
Easy, miss. I've got you.
You've got me! Who's got you?
For a generation of fans, Kidder's performance complemented the earnest performance of Christopher Reeve as the Man of Steel. With new appraisal of the film and its 40th anniversary, Kidder's Lois Lane can be clearly seen as the truest version of the iconic comics character that Hollywood has ever produced. Kidder's Lois Lane is the embodiment of Metropolis. For a man from the laid-back hamlet of Smallville, Lois bursts into Clark's life with all the energy, style, and life of Superman's new hometown. It's Kidder's decision during her audition to play Lois as a stammering schoolgirl in the presence of Superman that won her the part.
Clark said that you were rigged with wires, like Peter Pan.
Well, Peter Pan flew with children, Lois, in a fairy tale.
But looking at the movie, it shows as earnest and heartfelt a performance as Christopher Reeve's. That's what a lot of other iterations of Lois Lane get wrong. Other Lois Lane interpretations confuse strength with bitchiness, style with glamour, and skepticism with cynicism. Lois Lane shouldn't be cynical. The reason Lois and Superman work as a couple is because they recognize themselves within the other. Lois is an investigative reporter, fighting for the powerless, standing up for the little guy. She leads with her heart and with her chin. She throws herself into danger because she knows no one else will, until she meets Superman. It's not the Prince Charming aspect of Superman that's making her swoon like a schoolgirl. It's having someone to believe in. In 1990, Margot Kidder was seriously injured in a car accident. Difficulties working on her autobiography eventually led to a very highly publicized manic episode in 1996 and a nervous breakdown. Sadly, then as now, stigmas over bipolar disorder kept her an object of derision in Hollywood. Certainly, Hollywood holds the door open for former substance abusers. You might even appear in the biggest franchise blockbuster of all time. Margot Kidder's performance as Lois Lane is one for the ages. A classic that will be evaluated and reevaluated forever. And while there's a lot of performances that generate praise in Superman the movie, it's time for us all to reevaluate Margot Kidder's Lois Lane, the silver screen's best version, and the only Lois Lane that Hollywood gets right.
Oh, we forgot to time ourselves. Oh, well, maybe next time.
Oh.
Well, good night.
Oh, good night. What a Superman. Superman.
You know, it's funny. I think there you hit upon it, Ken, in the piece, because you said Lois is not cynical. And I think overall, that's what the whole Superman franchise has gone towards. It's left, like as Joe said, it's not about hope anymore. It's all about cynicism. It's darkness. It's, everything is gloom and doom. And yeah, here comes Superman, but even he's not that hopeful, it seems to me anyway.
That was a really good piece. Fantastic job on that. Very nice tribute to Margot Kidder there. And I think, and you can see it played out there as well, the clips that you use in that perfect, because we talk about Christopher Reeve's dual performance as Superman and Clark Kent in that, but sometimes it's overlooked. Margot Kidder's dual performance, because she's sort of this, you know, in love schoolgirl kind of thing, looking up at Superman kind of thing. And then you've got the Lois Lane with Clark, where it's that sort of rat-a-tat dialogue in the 1940s, you know, his Gal Friday kind of thing, where she's just one sentence after another, the stream of consciousness, just these random thoughts coming in, and she's doing 16 things at once. And then with Superman, completely different. So yeah, very understated. So nice job bringing that out in that clip.
If you look at all of the screen tests from the other actresses that tried out for that part, you know why they went with Margot Kidder. She wasn't the most beautiful actress to try out for that part. But boy, oh boy, when you see her performance and more importantly, you see her chemistry with Christopher Reeve, you know why she got that part and why there was no other choice. And she was terrific. And I don't think she's been topped. I think that since then, the only two that I think even come close are Terry Hatcher and maybe Amy Adams. I think Amy Adams brings that sort of optimism and hope that we're talking about in some really bleak movies. But I think Terry Hatcher, when that show Lois and Clark was being done well, I think she was terrific. But Margot Kidder is the gold standard.
Yeah, Terry Hatcher did an amazing job, and I love her Lois in that. I always kind of go back and forth between the two because she gets to portray Lois a lot longer, so I think that one's much more ingrained in us. You know, Lois or Margot, especially the third movie. You know, she comes in and she's out immediately. But yeah, I do think almost everything about that is the gold standard. And John, you mentioned too one thing about I wanted to just jump back a second. You talked about is Clark the disguise? Is Superman the disguise? I've had a chance. Usually, when I talk to Superman actors, that's one of the questions I ask because each one almost approaches it differently. Is that, you know, I think, like you mentioned, Batman is who Bruce Wayne is. Bruce Wayne became the disguise. He, you know, in that alleyway. That Bruce Wayne was gone in that alleyway. He lost that. With Superman, it was interesting. Brandon Routh's take on it. I just talked to him a few weeks ago on a recent episode, and I asked him how he approached that. Thank you. It was long awaited. There's a lot of work on that one. But I kind of mentioned that to him, and he had mentioned that he said they're all kind of the same person, that if he were on Krypton, he'd be Clark. That's sort of how he portrayed it. That's who he is. He's Clark. So it's always interesting to kind of get these different takes on whether or not they think Clark is the disguise or Superman is the disguise. But I thought that was an interesting take on it too, is that's who he is. He didn't kind of divide them up. Those were just all parts of his personality that he would bring into it. Now, Christopher Reeve, you know, completely different. He wanted honor, but I think that's how he deviated from the performance. That's why I love it so much. Yeah. With Brandon Routh is that it's. I think he honored Christopher Reeve from the Superman movies, but I did think he brought part of that into it. I think he was kind of an amalgam of some different characterizations, and he did make that his own. And he did have the sort of bumbling, but like you said, if he were on Krypton, he'd probably be doing that. That's who Clark was. He just was so full of life, and everything was a wonder to him. He just enjoyed life, and that's what he tried to bring to the role. So I thought that was an interesting take on it. I want more Brandon Routh as Superman. I just think he honored the legacy of Christopher Reeve with him, especially the flyby. We talked about the flyby at the end. He talked about how much work he put into that, of just getting that down right over the right before the credits roll again. But what could have been? What could have been?
Got screwed.
He did. Look. To put it succinctly, yes. That's what I'm trying to say. You're correct.
You see him in Legends of Tomorrow and a few of his other performances, and you see the charismatic young man that he is. And
yes.
The movie didn't give him the chance to kind of show himself as well as he could have. Yeah. He was a fine Superman, maybe not allowed to do as much Superman stuff in the movie.
You're absolutely right. And John, just to sort of circle back to you about whether, you know, this version of Superman could work today. I actually posed that very question to Richard Donner when I interviewed him, and his take on it was, you know, it is a different world today. It's dark and bleak and somewhat unhopeful. But he tries to, in any movie that he does, he tries to look at the more hopeful, optimistic view of things.
Right.
And he said that, nowadays, I mean, he thinks that there is a validity to his version of Superman today. And he even said, I would have him run against the president. He says because
he did mention that on Comic Book Central as well. Yeah, he said that would be the film that would bring him out of retirement.
And he said, where are you, Superman, when we really need you? So
protracted need to show his birth certificate and all that kind of stuff.
Well, wasn't that the point of Superman Returns? Wasn't that the line in there that, when he's watching, when he's in Smallville and he's come back and he sees what the world has become, and that was, 12 years ago now. But when he's watching that, and then I think there's a line later where he says to Kate Bosworth, Lois Lane, you ask if the world needs a Superman. I hear people crying out for a savior every day. There's that iconic scene where he's above the earth, listening to everything and yet tuning everything out to focus on one event that he's going to. But I think that's the spirit that film tried to bring back, was that you see all these things going on and that's what he hears. That's what he's processing.
Yeah.
And that's sort of been revisited even in the comics multiple times. Is like, is Superman relevant for today in today's world? I'm drawing a blank on, you guys will probably remember better than I do. But I forget the name of the story arc, but that was referenced, with some of these vigilante dark superheroes coming in. What's that?
Kingdom Come.
There's that one, and then there's also one in the main Superman titles. I forget the group of sort of. Yeah, I know all the comic book fans are going to get on me for this now. I'm just drawing a complete blank on the storyline, so forgive me all. But it's mentioned that is Superman relevant for today, and that's exactly what they talk about. And of course he is. And that Christopher Reeve tone of I'm a friend. Just here to help. And like you mentioned, that little wink, or that little smile as he walks away. He enjoys being Superman. That's what he wants to do. He just wants to help wherever he can. I think that's what we want to see. I don't necessarily want to see buildings crushing all the time and different things like that. So, yeah.
Well, the fact that Chris Evans has been so embraced as Captain America is one thing. And the other thing is the backlash that Marvel Comics got recently when they did that story that purports that Captain America was a member of Hydra all along. I mean, they could not have timed that story worse, because at a time when 65% of the country feels that the president of the United States is an arch villain, you don't want to have Captain America not being a symbol of hope and truth and justice and the American way. And I think that we do need that version of Superman probably more than ever right now. And so there is a validity to it. And I think that to question it or to reject it is doing yourself and that character a major disservice, because people need heroes right now. They really, really do. That's one of the reasons why George Lucas made Star Wars. Star Wars was in part a reaction to Watergate and the fact that anti-heroes were dominating the movies, like in The Godfather. He wanted to bring heroes back, traditional heroes that kids could look up to and aspire to be. Well, if we're not living through that time again right now, I don't know when we would be. So we need Superman, and we need that Superman.
You're bringing up memories of Land of Confusion by Genesis. There's a line in the song, "Oh Superman, where are you now?"
Yeah. And thank you, Google, by the way. What did we do back in the day? We've already had the story I was so desperately trying to figure out. It's called "What's So Funny About Truth, Justice, and the American Way," written by Joe Kelly.
Yep.
And it was The Elite. That was the team, The Elite. Yeah, I just couldn't think of it. But that's check that story out if you haven't already. It's amazing. But again, that's addressed like almost every decade.
Right?
Is Superman irrelevant? Is the red tights are the underwear on the outside? It makes them look silly. And we're like, get rid of it and make them look dark again. No, they brought the red tights back. They brought him back. Why? Because that's Superman.
Yeah,
that's what he looks like. Even Brandon Routh, I asked him, and he says, on the outside, and he says, yeah, of course, that's Superman. He gets it.
Gentlemen, we're starting to run out of time here, and I want to cap this with just a final thought on the movie. And I think we're all in the same agreement here, is that this is a movie of hope. And to me, if you're going to look at any of the other superhero movies from this point on, that's what you have to look for in that movie. You have to see if it's got that message of hope. If it doesn't, it fails as a superhero movie. It may be spectacular looking with all its special effects, with all the dialogue they may give the heroes and such like that. There may be some fantastic performances. But if you don't walk away feeling hopeful, then there's something wrong. And again, I know, forget Infinity Wars, though. I mean, yeah,
they're coming back. They have hope. They'll be back. They're in another dimension. They're all alive. They all have contracts. They'll come back. Have hope.
So I know. That's what I'm saying. Take that one out. But but if it doesn't have some sort of hope, then you're not really dealing with a superhero movie. You still can have a great movie, but it's not a superhero movie. So as we wrap up here, and I'll just do a round robin around here, starting with Joe. Joe, final thoughts on Superman the movie.
I still believe a man can fly. Every second of every day, this guy behind me, I'm watching the DVDs, I'm watching the Blu-rays. I still believe a man can fly. They did it. They pulled it off. It's the gold standard. Period.
Ken?
Well, it's going to stand the test of time because you actually care about those characters. It's elevated beyond being children's fare or juvenile source material or anything like that. It's going to survive because the movie is beautifully crafted. It's well staged, and you honestly believe in the man that you believe can fly.
All right. And Glenn?
For me, it's because of the philosophy that Jor-El says at the beginning of the movie. They can be a great people, Kal-El. They wish to be. All they need is the light to show them the way. And he is that light. And that's why that movie works for me. He's somebody you can believe in. He's somebody that you wish really existed. He's somebody that we should aspire to be. And that sets him apart from, like you said, the movies that don't work. There has to be a character that you aspire to be, that you want to live up to their example. And that's who Superman, that's who that version of Superman is. And that's why I love that movie.
Now, as we wrap up here, I also want to give you guys a moment to just promote anything you've got going on here. Glenn, let's start with you. I know you've got the piece coming up in, what's it called again? Retro Fan Magazine. It's launching very soon. The first issue should be coming out anytime now. My cover story is in issue number 3, which comes out around December, January, and it's the cover story. It's an interview with Richard Donner, just he and I, just having a really great chat. And how can people get a hold of you if they want to touch base with you more on Superman or, comment on your interview with Donner?
You can reach me on Twitter at Glenn L. Greenberg, GLENNLGREENBERG. That's at Twitter.
All right. And Ken, how are things going with The Quick and the Dad?
It's going pretty well. I have got pages from issue 7 in front of me right now. You can find me all over Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all of those clever places. Look in the show notes for how to spell my name. But yeah, everything's going good guns for The Quick and the Dad. I'm very happy to do it. I hope people find it cute. I hope it's not going to be the next Watchmen, but maybe it could be the next Sad Sack.
By the way, very kudos on you for getting the like by Mark Hamill for your Joker sketch.
Nice.
Yeah, only a couple of days into Twitter, and I think I've won.
And Joe, how's things going over at Comic Book Central? What's coming up?
Always busy. Well, right now, the Superman celebration. So I took a couple of weeks off, went to the Superman celebration, recorded a lot of content. Surprise, surprise, Superman the movie was well represented there. So we got some chats there. It's comicbookcentral.net is the website, or blogtalkradio.com/comicbookcentral. So many interviews with celebrating Superman 80th all year long, celebrating Superman 40th all year long. The cast, you can go back through the archive. There's a ton of Superman interviews out there. People that listen to the show probably get the idea that I love this film a lot. So yeah, Donner's out there. Brandon Routh was a couple of weeks ago. We talked about that in the legacy of Christopher Reeve. So tons and tons of Superman stuff. I just uploaded the latest one, Superman Celebration. Next week is the Krypton Q&A that I ran there as well. And then, Back Issue Magazine 109, that's coming out at the end of the year, too. So Superman Collectibles article I wrote, including that soundtrack that I just showed you. It's my favorite.
And that's one thing. Because we only had an hour here, but we didn't even get into the whole, issues with the film and everything that went on between Donner and what have you. And but when you think about it, like how it still came out in the end, and how they managed to get the film out in time for that 40th anniversary of Superman, the character himself, it was pretty amazing.
I heard that at this celebration, Jack O'Halloran still mentions that to Ilyas Alkind about Donner being off the project. That's what I heard. So,
oh, man. Well, gentlemen, once again, thank you very much. And that's going to do it for this episode of the Chronic Rift podcast here on Facebook Live. Tune in next Sunday when I am joined by author Greg Cox. He's going to be talking to us about his upcoming trip to San Diego Comic-Con, where he is receiving a very special honor. And we'll get into that next week here on the podcast. So until then, folks, thank you so much for watching. And the audio itself will be up either this evening or early tomorrow morning, Monday. But until next week, have a great week. And this is John saying, take care, everybody.